So do you have any stories of your time at what was SCC, now RVCC, that you would want to share with the people?
Well, back when I was going to school, 68, 69, that it was a time of turmoil in the country. And I think one of the episodes during those 2 years that illustrates that best is when they had the lottery for the draft. And at the time the draft was being conducted and they ran this lottery, SCC put, I would say, a huge chalkboard above the gym doorway entrance, and they recorded each date as it was pulled from the drawing that they had. So you would say there was quite a bit of interest in that drawing, and I was in one of the higher numbers, but it was a situation where a lot of people were concerned about their future because it was so uncertain as to what they would be doing. So that was one of the memories that I have. Another was going to Greenbrook School and being in a college environment with sixth graders. And when there was time to change classes for the Somerset County College students, and you would see these sixth graders in the hallway, it's like, wow, they're small. But it was an interesting experience in that regard. As for the Greenbrook School, because it was new, there were no athletic fields. Parking was, in a sense, limited as to where you could park, because the parking lot, if I recall correctly, was not finished. So it was first come, first serve. Another memory would be the cost of what the education back in those 2 years cost me at Somerset County College. I completed the 2 years, all the credits that I took, the final bill was $600. Compare that to what it is today. Another thing was that being a commuter school and going to college, because I live in Bridgewater, that I was given a $5 allowance. Now, that $5 for 1 week would give me enough to fill up my car with gas, have lunch at Pat Boone's hot dog stand, right on the corner of 22 there, and have changeover. Try and see how far you can go on $5 nowadays. Not too far. But it was a good education. I was a data processing student, and back then we learned on equipment that has probably gone out of existence a long time ago. One of the machines that I learned on was what was known as an IBM 402 accounting machine. That machine was one that you, as a user, had to wire up with boards, and it was at first a new experience, and we were given a lot of lessons as IT students to solve. Another machine that we had back then, excuse me, was an 082 sorter. Everything was done with punch cards. And some people might say, what's a punch card? So you had to key up your own programs, make sure you had the right punches. For computer languages, the first 2 years we were taught autocoder as an introduction, and then we went on to COBOL. We were given a brief introduction to a scientific program called Fortran. So those, from what I recall, were the 3 basic programs that we learned the language of. As for my instructors, we had some very good ones, and it served as a good introduction to college. If I remember correctly, there was a Mr. James Lego who was the data processing instructor. Our accounting instructor was a gentleman by the name of Andy Batula. And there was another data processing instructor by the name of Ruth Malmstrom. I'm trying to think who else there was. I think business education might have been a gentleman by the name of Stanley Kissel. And as for, oh yes, I cannot forget the SCC gym classes, which were conducted by Augie Esso. And it was almost like high school gym where you had uniforms, and it lasted for about whatever the classes were, I forget how long, but you had intramural basketball programs, they had intramural football, I think it was something like 5-on-5, but basically that would be the extent of what I recall from my 2 years at Somerset County College.
Do you believe that you got a good start at SCC when you were there? Like a good foundation in what your college experience would be like when you went on to a 4-year school?
In some ways, to answer that would be kind of difficult, because when you consider the environment we were in with 6th graders, you really cannot consider that a college environment. But to answer your question about getting a solid foundation, I would say yes, because getting the associate's degree enabled me that when I did go to apply for a job and learning what I did, it enabled me to get my foot into the door. I worked for 9 years at American Cyanamid in their data processing department. And for people that don't know where that was, it is where the Somerset Patriots ballpark is now located. They had a huge chemical plant. Working there at first, I was basically what they called a control clerk, making sure that everything matched up. We would work up the payroll for the various hourly employees, so that a lot of the training I received with the machines we worked with, I was familiar. So it wasn't that hard making the adjustment in that regards. That career, because of the work ethic and what I was doing in regards to quality control, the manager of the data processing department asked me if I would like to go into computer operations. In other words, be a computer operator. And at first I was a little bit hesitant because it's something new, something I was not familiar with, but then I decided this would be nice. So I learned how to run an IBM 360 computer, worked 2 years nights, and one of the reasons they put me on was that the quality of the work that I did during the day, it gave them better quality with the programs and the reports that came out, so that they would be done in a more timely and efficient manner. So going back to your original question about a foundation, I feel that from what I learned at Somerset County College gave me that foundation to build upon as I went forward with my career.
So, are there any big differences that you can see from the time that you were a college student to what the school has become now, 50 years later?
I think, and this is my own opinion based on observations, today's students are more into the technology. And that's good, but it's also bad, because what that does is that it restricts them in a manner to have a spontaneous conversation, how to interact with people to get their ideas across. People feel more comfortable maybe texting their comments But when you talk face to face with an individual, you can always get a better idea if they're interested, if they're not interested, by the way they present themselves or their facial expressions, or simply if they fall asleep while you're giving that presentation. That would be a hint that it's not going over too well. I think when I look back, learning on what I did with the machines that Somerset County College had, and the way its IT has developed over the years, I have more of an appreciation of the technology nowadays, because you can see where we came from in regards to computer systems and the various devices that are available as to what it is now. So in that regards, I would say be able to present your thoughts face to face, because I think that would make you a better person in being able to communicate your thoughts, your ideas, your displeasures. And social media is good, but keep it at a certain limit. Just don't dwell on it. Because, like I said, the one thing we had back then was that we had to talk to people in order to resolve problems. We didn't have the social devices that they have nowadays. So, that would be my comment in regards to that.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, what similarities do you see between your time at SCC and RVCC today?
That's a good question. And it would be hard to answer that, because I think you would have to take into consideration the times that we were experiencing back then as a society compared to what it is nowadays. Back then, you had the Vietnam War going on, a lot of turmoil in the country, and for students in that age bracket, it was a very uncertain time to some degree. People that had student deferments from the draft board, that was dropped, and now they were draft eligible. So if you're in your second year or first year even, and you're considered draft eligible, that's a lot of uncertainty in a young person's life. Today's student, from what I've seen, they're a lot smarter, they're more knowledgeable, but with that knowledge, I think they're lacking in how it relates to the overall picture. Because one of my favorite things is reading newspapers.
Me too.
And as a result, I think when you read the newspaper, you get a better understanding of what's going on. If you just rely on the internet or social media, you're getting a view that somebody could have doctored, or, as our president likes to say, is false news or fake news. So I would say for today's student, take time to read newspapers or any print matter that's a reputable source. Mad Magazine, not too reputable, but still funny. So that would be my opinion.
So do you believe there's just minimal similarities between students of your time and the students at RVCC today because of the different situations, the different environments that they were in? Or do you believe that there are some similarities, but it's hard to see them because of how much has changed?
I would say that's a correct assumption. Another reason I really can't cannot go into detail is that not being up here to observe students' actions or talk with them, you really can't make a good opinion, or perhaps a better word would be evaluation of today's students. I recall that when I went back to King's College after 9 years of work, that one of the differences I found after being in the working world for 9 years and going back into a college environment, that it was quite a shock to me, because you work, you get a different set of values, and to see the way the students were at King's, because basically they were fresh out of high school, that there were different values placed as to what I had versus their values in relation to maybe something as much as money.
Mm-hmm.
What was important, what isn't, and even something as common as manners. That those were items that, how can I phrase this? Those were items that seemed to be lacking to a certain degree. I'm not saying my time at King's College was a bad experience, because it was a good one. I feel that my being there had an impact on some of the students that I still remain friends with to this day. But on the other hand, it was kind of funny, because sometimes if you don't know a person, you make judgmental values. And to illustrate that point, I had a class, public speaking, and because going back to college, I was 30 years old at the time, so I'm like maybe anywhere from 10 years older than most of the student body. I'll never forget that until they got to know me in that public speaking class, a lot of the students thought I was an undercover cop doing drug investigations.
Oh my.
But I said no. I explained, the situation as to why I went back to school and everything. But it was a very interesting 2 years that I did there to get my bachelor's degree in business administration. Which brings me back to your point, because graduating from Somerset, I had 60 credits. Now you're talking 9 years later when I went back to King's College. And you would figure some of those credits would not have been accepted after that length of time. Turned out that King's College accepted 55 of those credits, which I thought was pretty good.
It's very good.
And when I finally did graduate, my GPA up there was around 2.85, which is not bad, again, for somebody that's been out of school for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good experience. And like I said, it gets back to one of your original comments about a foundation. Applying what I learned at Somerset County College, because I was the only member of my family to go to college. And right there, that could be a challenge, because one doesn't have the confidence in themselves to maybe reach that goal of getting a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that, so as you go further down the road in life, you're able to have that confidence to say, I can overcome this challenge and succeed. So I would say that's my comment.
So as a graduate from one of the first couple of classes from SCC, do you have any advice that you would want to give to the 50th graduating class of RVCC?
The advice I have might be that old saying, take it one day at a time. But look down the road for your future, because sometimes the decisions that one makes today does have a big impact on the rest of their lives. It's kind of hard to say, because financially, when you go to school today, the amount of debt that a student comes out with in regards to their loans could be overwhelming. So it sort of restricts what they do down the road because of those financial obligations. Business-wise, take what they've learned and build upon that. When I went from my original job at Cyanamid, I took what I learned there, applied it to where I went next, and built upon what I learned in that second job. And I feel that looking back in my career, at first, going into a new job, because you really do not know what it entails, or even the people that you're going to meet along the way, you have to basically take it one day at a time. And I think this is where we get back to the idea of being able to communicate face to face. Because if you're dealing with somebody in the office, you have to be able to read them so that you can work with them in an efficient manner. And maybe that's another thing that they should consider when they start a job. That when you go into an office situation with that first job, don't be like gangbusters, but learn the geography of the land that you're in, the office politics and everything else that's associated with it before you start making comments. And when you do, you have to be able to present those comments in a way that will be constructive, but yet not insulting, or I guess insulting would be the best way. But you have to be able to get your points across in a diplomatic manner to succeed and progress in your career. Working with people is the bottom line. And if you don't know how to do that, what can I say?
Where do you hope RVCC, or for you SCC, where do you hope 50 years the school will be, or what do you hope they will be doing, 50 years down the line when we have the 100th class?
Wow, that would make me 118 years old. And if you remember the old show, Laugh In with Artie Johnson, I might be coming back here to interview with the next editor of the magazine or the publication for, I'll say, RVCC. But what would I like to see them do? They're on a good road teaching today's students. They would have to maintain the technology so that the students that come out of here are not shortchanged in learning certain aspects of business or whatever studies they're taking up. They instituted, if I remember correctly, a nursing program, which is good because, again, when you look at the overall picture, society today is aging. So that maybe one day people like me will need that nurse that graduated from Raritan Valley Community College. And if I do, I'm hoping that he or she is well trained. The programs have to go forward. They can't remain stagnant, which means having the best professors that are available, keeping up with the technology, and hopefully maintaining the facilities that you have here so that it can accommodate all that needs to be done to deal with the future education of the students that pass through here.
If you have any final comments, this would be the time to make them, but other than that, I have no further questions.
Right now, I would not have any further comments simply because it's kind of hard for me to put into words what I've experienced versus what I have now. But I think the bottom line is, if I didn't make the choice to go to Somerset County College back when I did, that I sometimes wonder what life would be like for me now. And taking that chance to go there, graduate, it was something that helped build my life so that now that I'm retired, I can enjoy certain things in life with not having to worry, dealing with some of the situations in regards to the technology, looking at it in a logical manner, and just enjoying my retirement based on what I've learned through life. So that would be my final thoughts.